Hey Rebecca, Professor Moran here with some feedback on your first essay for ISSOC 125 Cinematic Sociology. Uh, I guess the first thing you did go over the word count significantly by 400 words, but in this case it isn't too much of a problem because I think for the most part it was a pretty solid essay. I think where I'm most impressed or I'm happiest is in the uh, fact that you understand the material that we're talking about in class. So you make reference to the different theorists, Marx, Locke, uh, Smith, etc., and you talk about them quite well, and your understanding seems to be quite proficient. So I'm very happy with that. That's great. Overall, the structure to the essay in terms of the introduction, the conclusion, the body, the way you use headings, all that stuff I love to see. So that's a great thing. So great understanding, good structure, etc. So I'm very happy with that. You'll see I'll hand this or I'll attach this to the email. You can see I've made comments on the side, and you'll be able to see what I'm referring to. The major problem that I had, or the biggest issue that you need to attend to, is your writing and your style of writing, in particular how you phrase your sentences. Really needs to be dealt with. I think you definitely have a great vocabulary, but when it comes to actually writing sentences, at certain times it seems to be a little bit difficult, and I have had problems understanding some of the things that you're trying to say. So I think that's the major thing that you can begin to work on is how you phrase and how you express yourself in your writing. If you go back and just read these first three sentences, and imagine that you were coming to this with no background. Imagine that you hadn't written this. Read them back and see what you think. Even better, if you're at home or whatever, have a parent or a sibling or a friend read these sentences and just ask for their kind of honest assessment. I think what you need to perhaps do is to simplify your style of writing and try to state things as straightforwardly as possible. So that's the key thing, okay? And I think that's something that you can certainly work on. And I think once you get a handle on that, it'll be fine. Maybe a more judicious editing, maybe have someone help you with the editing, all that would help. Even small things like not attending to the underlined, the green underline between precursor and of, not doing little things like that, it just doesn't bode well. So definitely that needs to be worked on. You can see here there's no space between the colon and the page number. I've written that there. You can look at that. Again, there's a lot of green underlines that you need to deal with. But then as we move down, more green underlines just shows me that you haven't added it to any great extent. As we move down, you do a great job with Locke and you do a great job with Hobbes, and you mention Adam Smith, which is absolutely great. Again, it looks really good. You clearly understand the material, but there's problems with your phrasing and expression, so that's just what I've been mentioning. Here, when we talk about the connection to contemporary society, I think you could have done a better job. Could have done a better job in connecting their ideas to what's happening in U.S. society today. It's just not explicit enough for my liking. So again, that's something that you could improve upon next time. Uh, this here is a good example of your problem with phrasing. The next stage in the transformation of capitalism was in the Industrial Revolution. It just doesn't read right. It particularly was in the Industrial Revolution. So think about how you could rewrite that. Think about how you could rephrase that to make it much more clearer, much more explicit. So again, no real problems with the material, which is great. Okay, there's a little point in just a little. It's kind of self-evident. If we're not for capitalism and the Industrial Revolution, one would not be driving, flying, typing, manufacturing, and so on. All of these activities have taken place in communist societies, which are the kind of antithesis of capitalism. So factually, that statement is incorrect. So it's just important that you know that. Again, you try to make an example, a comparison here between class in New York City and the Bronx and the Upper Manhattan, etc., which is fine. I think it could have been explored, maybe looking at the more recent example of Occupy Wall Street and the Occupy movement in general would have maybe made it a little bit more explicit. Uh, there's also something that you perhaps could have turned to some kind of evidence to explain your point. If you look at the distribution of wealth, distribution of income, rates of poverty, etc., those kinds of statistical evidences would have helped you build a more solid or a better argument. Uh, Again, little small things like this. It's comped with an E, and so it's spelled incorrectly. So, but again, you talk about the right things, and you're mentioning the right things, and pretty much up until this last section, you've done very well with the theory. I think what you don't have here is reference to Max Weber and the idea of the iron cage of rationalization. So that's one little thing that you missed out in terms of the theoretical content. Uh, Not a huge deal, but still important to mention. You have a nice to a certain extent, you have uh, a decent enough conclusion, which is fine. The final issue that I would have is in terms of your reference. You reference the textbook. You don't reference the Kimmel article. What you need to do is to have Kimmel reference, and reference as a chapter in this textbook. So if you go to the style guide and course materials and look how to reference a chapter from an edited volume, you'll see that it should have been different. So overall, I don't have major problems. I think you did quite a good job. Especially in the first essay, I like to focus more so on how well the student is understanding the material, and you're understanding it very well. But also, obviously, it's important for me to give you feedback in terms of how you can improve as a student, and the issues with writing are definitely something that you could look to improve upon. If you have any questions about what I've been talking about, or if you need any kind of help with any of the measures or any of the issues that I've talked about, just please ask. All right, take care and talk to you soon.